As technology redefines the world, accelerates the pace of change, and challenges the status quo, expectations for modern government services, efficient operations, and effective outcomes have never been higher. Agencies are rethinking business and operating models, including the IT environments that are becoming harder to maintain and even harder to secure. Digital government requires intelligent digital infrastructure to bridge legacy and next-generation technologies, to free IT to shape an unlimited future, protect against cybersecurity threats, and deliver new value, capabilities, and experiences to citizens and employees across any device, any app, any cloud. When it's time to turn the impossible into the essential, the public sector turns to a digital transformation partner with 20 years' experience innovating and securing the world's most complex government IT infrastructure as a force for good. Where could an intelligent digital foundation take your mission next?
Hello, my name is James Hansen. I'm the Group Publisher of Federal and Technology Markets at GovExec. In our quarterly Spotlight series, Up Close, Conversations with Cloud Leaders, NextGov sits down with leaders across the federal government and the private sector to discuss the impact of migrating to the cloud, from misconceptions to the role applications play in strategic planning to tactical decision-making. Today, I'm excited to have a global technology leader from our series underwriter, VMware. James Forrester is the Vice President and Worldwide Technical Leader of Cloud Sales. James is responsible for leading VMware's cloud sales technical community to help accelerate customer journeys to the cloud, modern apps, and cloud-native services across VMware and its partners' cloud platforms. Prior to joining VMware, James has spent more than 2 decades leading enterprise financial service technology teams globally, including applications development, operations, and enterprise architecture functions. Most recently at AWS as the head of technology for global accounts. Thank you for joining me, James. I really appreciate it. I'm excited to talk to you today, and I'd love to hear just a little bit about your role at VMware and how do you define cloud?
Absolutely. Thanks, James, for that nice intro. It's great to be here. Great to be talking with you today. So like you said, I joined VMware last year from AWS, where I'd spent a number of years as head of technology for globals. And the journey that I was on, I think, mimicked the journey that I saw a lot of our customers on, which was over the last several years, moving from thinking about whether cloud is real, is it secure, is it here to stay, to an embracing of cloud in all its forms, from hybrid to private to public. And then eventually more of a multi-cloud conversation started to enter the discussion. So to me today, and being at VMware, what's so exciting about my role is I get to help customers on those multi-cloud journeys across private and public and hybrid and edge environments. And really what I think we're landing on is a definition of cloud and a value of cloud, which makes the most sense to customers as a way of accessing compute resources on demand when they need them, scaling up, scaling down as necessary, and being able to take advantage of great new capabilities that drive innovative outcomes for customers and paying only for what they use.
Yeah, in federal, I often hear that, how they define across all of those different environments. So as federal leaders do turn to multi-cloud and IT modernization initiatives to improve mission delivery, workforce productivity, many agencies are looking at hybrid cloud solutions that provide consistent infrastructure and operations, whether that be on-premise or virtual environments. But migrating to the cloud is not easy, as you know. So what are some of the biggest misconceptions people have about cloud migration?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you hit the nail on the head with that first one, is that it's something that can be done overnight, if you like. One day your application's running in your data center, the next day it's running in a cloud. Usually what I see is that customers will spend a great deal of time assessing their environments and assessing their full portfolios to try to understand which parts of their environment can move most quickly. And oftentimes that assessment process can really kind of bog down a migration. So I think that first misconception is really that you have to assess everything before you can understand which parts of your environment can take advantage of cloud and can benefit from cloud. What I usually end up customers to do is to think about which parts of their environments could potentially benefit the most from cloud across security, performance, operations, reliability, cost, or sustainability, and then targeting those specific applications for modernization or moving to cloud to start getting those benefits early.
And so as you know, organizations are assessing their environment or looking at those kind of small bets to migrate, what are the biggest mistakes that organizations tend to make in doing that?
I think oftentimes what I see is that customers will try to zero in on a single cloud provider and then fit their applications to that single cloud provider's specific set of technologies. More often than not, there's a lot more complexity to that than that gets uncovered as they look at the application itself and start to peel the layers of that application back, especially when it's been around for a long time. And quite often, the web of dependencies that a particular application might have, whether it's technical dependencies, organizational or operational dependencies, can kind of make the journey that much more complicated. So what I generally see in customers who are most successful in their cloud journeys is to use the tools at their disposal, as well as their own knowledge of their environments, to really think about which parts of their environment can be, if you like, moved wholesale. Think about which things are going to benefit the most and have the fewest dependencies, and then target those as a priority. There's very few applications that I've seen that cannot get any kind of benefit from cloud. And the sooner that those applications move, the sooner they'll start to realize those benefits.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, this past year has certainly been a dramatic change for everyone, especially for government agencies and serving its citizens. While the pandemic, I think, has sped the need and urgency for agencies to move application workloads, data, services to the cloud, it can often take, you know, organizations years to complete a cloud migration project, presenting enormous challenges of speed, time, resources. From your perspective, how has COVID-19 and the pandemic affected the adoption of cloud technologies?
Yeah, great topic. I think there's a couple of different ways in which COVID-19 has accelerated the sense of urgency in a lot of these different considerations. Firstly is of course in remote working and the ability to very rapidly be able to provide comprehensive services to remote workforces, as well as remote customer bodies who are now accessing services online more so than ever before. And that's something which the instant scalability and on-demand scalability and the nature of cloud really lends itself to very well. And then hopefully as we round the corner of this pandemic, being able to scale those resources back down again when potentially different types of customer interactions start to resume, that means that customers then aren't carrying a great deal of large infrastructure investment that perhaps their customers don't need to consume anymore. I think that's one. Another area is certainly in the notion of resiliency. We've all become that much more dependent, I think, on the online services that we've come to use. Certainly my own kids and our friends, and moving into a homeschooling environment and so forth, we've become absolutely dependent on those online services. So where we might have been able to tolerate a little bit more downtime, a little bit less resiliency in the past because we could go somewhere or do that thing in person, those tolerances have gone way down. So the need for very rapid recovery, the need for very high levels of availability and consistency has gone way up. And then I think probably the third thing is just the way that we budget and plan and provision for computing resources. where previously we might have been able to predict within a reasonable degree a level of growth, a level of investment, a level of spend over time as hardware that we own depreciates and we know that we need to replace that hardware. A lot of that has become much more inconsistent, much more spiky, with peaks and valleys of demand, peaks and valleys of needing to be able to access compute resources quickly and then spin them down again quickly, which has changed the way that the customers look to purchase and look to budget. And cloud, of course, lends itself to that very well with the pay-as-you-go pricing.
And you think from a strategy perspective that it has, changed the way that organizations plan for future cloud adoption? Like I've heard some of the coverage that we've had at NextGov, there's been instances where, there might be a component or an office of a larger enterprise that moved to, one application or a couple citizen services that are into the cloud in order to, support their constituents. And it's kind of created like cloud silos a little bit. How do you think overall this, exactly what you just talked about changes future strategy planning? We still don't know exactly what the future of work is going to look like. We anticipate that it's going to be more of a hybrid environment where you're working remotely and in the office. How do you think it changes just overall cloud strategic planning for the long term?
Yeah, great call out. I think it's accelerated everything, honestly. And where in my own cloud journey, I saw customers do very similar to what you described in terms of spinning up pockets of cloud expertise, pockets of what we called cloud centers of excellence, maybe focused around a single application or a single cloud, and then developing operational expertise and so on in a small but very effective way. That has translated into a real acceleration and a lot of heroics, I think, through the COVID time, where being able to provide services quickly, being able to take advantage of cloud capabilities quickly without long purchasing procurement cycles in order to provide those services to their constituents has painted a lot of IT organizations in a very positive light for the way that they've been able to do that and effectively be heroes for their organizations and be heroes for their constituents. But all of that, it's definitely my hope, and I see this starting to manifest, is going to turn into new operating models, much more focused around modern applications, DevOps, CI/CD, which let these organizations innovate for their customers more quickly using the cloud capabilities that make sense to them, as opposed to very long lead times in order to be able to get customers able to use those services.
Yeah, I love how you frame that in terms of heroes, because we definitely saw so many of them, over the last year. And to that point, we have constantly been reporting on those heroes and use cases where agencies and organizations have been able to modernize in months, where it in the past had taken years for, certainly large scale modernization efforts. So to that end, thinking through legacy technology, it is one of the, it's one of the biggest challenges certainly facing the federal government to modernize their environments. I mean, many agency systems and applications are still using COBOL computer language. So what role does legacy infrastructure play in migrating to the cloud, whether organizations are trying to move from a mainframe environment or from on-prem to public cloud solutions?
Yeah, absolutely. And legacy, honestly, is a tremendous opportunity for the organizations that feel like they have a lot of it. It's important, I think, to call out that migration of systems doesn't necessarily entail a great deal of change to those systems. Sometimes it does, and there's always the option for customers to transform and modernize at the same time as moving. But it's worth keeping in mind that for systems which maybe are difficult to maintain, which maybe are difficult to get under the covers of, there's a tremendous set of benefits in cloud around cost and reliability and security and performance, which can be picked up by those systems just by moving them. And then, of course, once they're moved, cloud is very forgiving about that modernization process. If you're trying to modernize a legacy system in place on legacy hardware, that can become a very, very complex, high risk value proposition. And we've all run into environments where passwords weren't available, or the source code wasn't available, or nobody knew how to reinstall the application if it had to be reinstalled. That's a reality. But again, being able to snapshot those things and then moving them to more modern virtualized hardware in various different environments can provide a lot of benefits and makes it very easy to roll back should the migration not go well. If it does go well, and when the application is moved, the benefits in terms of performance and resiliency and cost optimization immediately get unlocked for those organizations. So it's not a move and modernize, but only one or the other type of equation. It's pick the workloads that are going to get the best benefits, modernize those that need to be modernized, move those that need to be moved, and then modernization opens up and becomes that much easier.
Yeah, no, I love that. And so how important is it to have like a governance model? And how would you define like a governance model in terms of like moving applications to the cloud or moving from legacy systems to a more modernized hybrid cloud solution?
Yeah, it's absolutely critical. And I think what is improving at a very rapid pace over the last several years is organizations' ability to take their existing governance models and apply them to cloud without having to adopt a whole new set of processes, without having to adopt a whole new set of controls, without having to adopt a whole new set of tools. That's something that customers are finding increasingly attractive. I think in the earlier days of cloud, customers would have to change their security model, their operating model, and if they had multiple clouds, it would be a different operating model for each cloud. Today, fast forward, what we see is that customers are able to use many more of the skills and controls and processes and governance that they have, which makes it easier for their workforces to consider cloud moves and think of those in a risk management context, and then preserve the preventative and detective and compensated controls that they already have in place. One of the developments, which I think is pretty compelling, is the rate at which the various cloud providers, be they on-prem or hybrid or public, are effectively racing to achieve a high level of certification. So you see new certifications come out almost all the time that customers can benefit from just by deploying their applications into those controlled environments. And where customers find themselves bogged down in policy debt and legacy controls that might have been layered on over time, but controls for the controls for the controls, they can then start to think about simplifying some of that in favor of the controls and governance that the underlying platform offers. So that's another way of simplifying and starting to unwind some of that technical debt as part of the journey.
And what role does data play in that governance model and those controls?
Yeah, hugely important. And we often talk in terms of data having gravity. And what we mean by that is where the data lives, the applications around it tend to live as well. It's often also in the kind of volumes of data that our customers deal with, it's a harder part of the decision-making process, because once that data lands in one spot, moving it to another spot can be quite involved and quite complicated. So what I think the conversation is very much evolving towards is data sovereignty, whereby very critical to put in the upfront work and effort to analyze the data sovereignty components of where the data is going to live, particularly if that data is highly controlled, and then making a set of decisions around the data that will then govern the decisions around the apps which interact with that data. And I think the great opportunity that cloud provides in that is that once those decisions are made, cloud makes it very, very straightforward to light up that data in terms of data lakes, analytics, governance, backup and restore in ways that can be quite complex and difficult on premise. So that's one of the use cases, along with being able to restore whole environments, that cloud can make a little bit easier for our customers.
Yeah, and so you talked about the resiliency of the cloud and how that provides kind of overall security. And along that theme of legacy technology, is security has really been the catalyst for agencies to modernize. And obviously there have been a number of recent government hacks administration has, come out with its own cyber executive order, which specifically calls out the need for agencies to move from vulnerable legacy technology to more secure cloud offerings. FedRAMP was developed to provide a security baseline to make it easier for agencies to adopt cloud technologies. It is without its own challenges. So how does, talk a little bit more about security and how it factors into the hybrid adoption decision?
Absolutely. Well, I think first and foremost, for many of us in the cloud world, security is job zero. It's the foundation of all trust, and if we don't have a secure base platform, then really we're nowhere with our customers. The key there, I think, is that customers can take advantage of those tremendous investments in security that are occurring across the board in terms of securing the platforms themselves that these applications run on. So that's a really key point to call out there. The more of the levels of the stack that the customer has to manage and secure themselves, the harder it is obviously for customers to be able to do that. Whereas if you've got an army of folks working on your behalf from whichever cloud providers you're working with, who are focused day in, day out and making sure that that environment is secure, then that's effectively something that you get just along with the platform, which is a great benefit of cloud. I think the second piece there is in terms of resiliency. There's really kind of two halves to it as I see a lot of customers think about it. One is, how do we harden the systems in the first place for availability, harden them from attack, make sure that they're available with our customers' expectations and regulators' expectations. But then there's also the how quickly we recover perspective. And that's been very notable, I think, in a number of the different ransomware attacks, which is organizations that were able to restore their environments end to end, were able to get back on their feet that much more quickly and resume providing services with confidence. One thing that cloud, of course, makes much easier is to have effectively a gold master copy of every aspect of your environment, whether it's the virtualized hardware, the applications running on it, the data that works with those applications, the networking configurations. If you have a snapshot of that, which you know that you can roll back to at any time, then that's a much more secure and risk-averse place to be than if you're trying to reinstall applications, reconfigure networking, and so forth. So I think that's another big part of the resiliency conversation.
So automation has played a big factor with agencies of late in terms of providing a capability that continuously monitors the environment, ensures that backup is as up to date as it is. Like, what role does either automation or how do you ensure continuous monitoring of a cloud environment?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it touches on something we were chatting about earlier, which is customers being able to use the tools with which they're familiar and the automation and the governance and controls with which they're familiar to run their cloud environments. That's a bit of a more recent development, as it was previously generally the case that customers would go through a lot of re-automation in order to automate and manage and monitor their cloud environment. These days, with multiple clouds, with the tool sets they have and the skill sets they have, customers can automate and control and manage those environments without having to essentially rip and replace everything they already have and is already proven to work. But I think the notion of automation around cloud is absolutely key. One of the most successful customer situations that I see is customers who are just continuously taking manual operations out of their environments and essentially are benchmarking themselves by how many manual operations they have to do in their environments in order to be able to support and maintain it. The fewer the manual operations, the more that can be automated, the better off the environment generally is. And cloud lends itself really well to that.
And you talked about it earlier too. I kind of want to just chat briefly about the cost implications and looking at total cost of ownership, because I think certainly in the federal space, one of the apprehensions necessarily of moving to the cloud or a hybrid environment are hidden costs. So you were really honing in on the value of cloud for managing budgets and how we procure. And I think, we government agencies have definitely moved the ATO process, accelerated that to allow agencies to move faster. But can you just talk a little bit more in detail about how agencies can evaluate the total cost of ownership after planning for the cloud, whether that's, migrating a set of applications and workloads or more of an enterprise approach to cloud?
Yeah, absolutely. And that total cost of ownership perspective is one that every customer really needs to start thinking about in their back pockets over the long term. There's more to it than just the cost of the technology, of course. And what I generally see as some of the major cost drivers are the organizational changes that customers have to go through in order to have a successful cloud journey and start bringing cloud capabilities into their environments. Now, the more that a customer can use their existing tools and existing processes and existing skills to start experimenting with cloud, then the lower that total cost of ownership is going to be by a pretty dramatic factor. And that's what I think the cloud industry has very much started evolving towards, not requiring customers to stand up whole new teams, whole new centers of excellence for each cloud capability that they want to bring in, because that gets expensive in a real big hurry. I think the other key piece of it is that we have to recognize that cloud will be for a period of time a combination of things for most of our customers. There'll be an on-premise component, a hybrid component, a public cloud component, and a cloud provider component, all sorts of other different flavors too. So that total cost of ownership really needs to look across all of those environments. When we see customers really get the most cost benefit out of cloud, it's when they don't excessively optimize upfront. So rather than trying to understand exactly what the run cost is today of an existing environment, which is a very complex exercise, start to see what the run cost is of a migrated application and then optimize that migrated application. What you'll see is the optimization process can happen very, very quickly and very easily. So I see oftentimes customers will spend a great deal of time trying to cost optimize their application before migrating it, and do that on paper. I really encourage customers to get out of the spreadsheets, learn by doing, get it up there, see what it really costs to run, and then find some great solutions architects who can help you go optimize that, because chances are it'll continue to come down in price.
Yeah, and I think even this past year showed certainly agencies that, they can pilot these things, to your point, to learn how best to optimize, to plan for more long-term strategic, enterprise decisions. Which brings me to my last question. I want to talk about innovation, and certainly cost is a priority, at the C-level, but also innovation and how to leverage emerging technology. So as you think about the ability to develop and deliver unique capabilities for the mission, which cloud really does allow, i.e. artificial intelligence, and you've talked about a number of other great use cases. I'd love to just get your thoughts on the relationship between innovation, the use of cloud, and the ability for global governments to adopt new technologies.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely a topic that's near and dear to my heart. And I think one of the things which I pair up with the concept of innovation is the concept of agility, business agility. And what cloud does is oftentimes will free up resources, whether they be financial resources, personnel resources, or other, to be able to focus on agility and then moving quickly and not having to make very large upfront capital investments in order to go experiment with some of these capabilities. I think you raised a great example there of artificial intelligence and machine learning, where really that is very much driven by data. So landing that data in an environment, a cloud environment, where those AI and ML capabilities can be adjacent to that data and can start to operate on that data, produces some fantastic results for customers. And that's very much the hot topic at the moment is data and artificial intelligence and machine learning. But innovation cuts across a number of domains: security, performance, operations, reliability, costs, sustainability. I read a great report recently that was starting to show that just by moving to a highly optimized cloud environment, the energy consumption of a particular instance, server instance, can be up to about 80% less, I think. So when we think about innovation, it's great that we have these cloud capabilities that we can start to take advantage of, but it comes back to, I think, making heroes out of these technologists who can deliver innovation across all of those different dimensions in all of their different respective areas, because of the kind of nimbleness and agility that cloud is able to bring without putting a lot of cash at risk up front in terms of purchasing these services, which might not produce outcomes, but when they do, they're pretty great outcomes.
This has been great, James. I thank you so much for your time, your commitment, and service to our global government workforce, our heroes, to ensure that they have the best set of capabilities to deliver on that mission and serve us constituents. And thank you again for VMware's support of NextGov's Up Close Conversation with Cloud Leaders series. From GovExec, I'm James Hansen.